Rachel Reeves has been dubbed the Christmas Grinch after an analysis by the Mail revealed that her budget tax grab means that 45 pence of every pound donated to the charity will go to the government.
The incompetent Rachel Reeves got demolished by Nana Akua for her endless blunders.
How long have Labour got before the restlessness sets in, either within their party or indeed the nation? I mean, we've already seen the polls, which have seen, 19 points taken off Labour's popularity, putting him now on a par with Jeremy Corbyn at his low point.
Rachel Reeves is on thin ice as the Labour Party is furious with her for ruining their reputation.
Learning the lesson that they've made a mistake, they come back for more taxes, and then the economy softens again. And that is Rachel Reeves' big danger now. She has so burdened and already over, the tax burden was at a highest record level at the end of the Tory years. It wasn't low then. She's added to it now.
Rachel's recent list of idiotic moves have crossed all limits of greed and hypocrisy, and the public is furious.
The Tory party are making themselves useful at last, and writing to Rachel Reeves. They're objecting to regulations that would force businesses to collect data on, you guessed it, diversity and inclusion, which will apparently cost the city up to £1 billion. Oh God, make it stop! The Tories have got a nerve, though. They let this baloney run wild.
The country is in outrage as Rachel Reeves' idiotic new idea is set to rob us of £1 billion.
Rachel seems to be prepared to continue with their legacy and effectively make it worse. Another bad decision from Rachel, although very much in keeping with her style. The new regulations, which have been drawn up by the FCA, that is the Financial Conduct Authority, and the Prudential Regulatory Authority, the PRA, will mean that companies will have to complete compulsory reporting of sex, gender, ethnicity, age, disability, religion, and sexual orientation. Why?
Nana Akua slams Rachel's non-stop blunders, but then again, what else can we expect from the Labour Party?
In a world where we all want to be treated as equal, why should these things matter or even be relevant? In any case, most firms collect a lot of this information anyway, but why do you need to know what someone's sexual orientation is? And what makes Rachel think people will willingly give this information in the first instance? Complete overreach under the guise of diversity and inclusion. It's just not relevant and is segregating. And when you're segregating, you divide people further.
Rachel and Labour's woke crowd love whining about equality, and now they're pushing for delusional discrimination schemes.
Andrew Griffith MP, Shadow Business and Trade Secretary, Mark Garnier MP, Shadow Economic Secretary to the Treasury, and Claire Coutinho MP, Shadow Women and Equalities Minister, have written to the Chancellor urging her to stop these regulations from coming into force. And in a letter, they stated that the proposed regulations would threaten British competitiveness, erode meritocracy in Britain, in British financial services, and embed scientifically unsound and contested ideological principles into regulations.
The Tories are begging Rachel to scrap this stupid plan that will further ruin the economy and society. But will she listen?
And to put all of this in place, it could cost about £1 billion. Now, a Treasury spokesperson said, economic reform is needed if we want to unlock the full growth potential of the British economy. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of all of this. Why can't we just treat everybody the same and stop highlighting differences? It makes no sense in a world where we're all supposedly equal.
Labour's calling it economic reform when it's nothing more than a woke, out of touch with reality, scheme that will cost us £1 billion.
The Labour Party, who, whether you like it or not, whatever the reason you think it happened, they were elected at the last general election, so now they are bringing in their values into government, and those values are rightfully the antithesis of conservatism and anybody to the right of politics, but they're trying to do it in a balanced way to a point where people on the hard left aren't happy with them.
Rachel Reeves is shamelessly going ahead with the plan, and the Labour elites are demanding more.
Point of this, listen, the point that even you must admit that is irrelevant. Why do I need to make sure I've got 10 gay people, 10 straight people, 10 bisexuals, 10... Why don't you just want people who can do the job?
Nana Akua is struggling to understand just how stupid this government can get, and Rachel keeps making things worse.
Rachel Reeves has been dubbed the Christmas Grinch after an analysis by the Mail revealed that her budget tax grab means that 45 pence of every pound donated to the charity will go to the government. In the meantime, ministers are accused of quietly pushing a green levy on businesses for packaging waste, set to raise household bills by up to 1.4 billion a year.
Rachel Reeves isn't done with making our lives miserable just yet. Just how greedy can this government get? Every passing day, she comes up with a new scheme to rob the people dry, and then she gets mad over people calling her Rachel Thieves. How shameless and pathetic do you have to be to tax charity? This is just the start of Rachel's recent blunders, and sadly, it gets much worse. Nana Akua absolutely wipes the floor with Rachel, who can't do anything but lose her mind as the economy plummets.
Diversity drive, because the city is saying that it could cost £1.6 billion.
Yeah, it's complete nonsense, and it's another example of the way that this Labour Party seems to be absolutely determined to hammer business in any way they can, from the national insurance rise to the changes to the minimum wage and the employment rights bill that will give employees day one rights rather than rights after 2 years, which is the normal way. They've kind of taken a 3, 4, 5, you can argue how many pronged assault on the UK's private sector, all to pay, I'm afraid, for the public sector.
There's no two ways about it, and people are done with watered-down criticism of Rachel Reeves. The truth of the matter is that Rachel Reeves hates this country and its businesses. To top it all off, she's incompetent beyond belief and is driving the economy straight into a wall. Then again, what else did we expect from a fraud and a habitual liar? She lies every time she says anything. Just look at the CV lying scandal that's still going on. Every single promise that Starmer and Rachel made about delivering growth is complete nonsense. How do they expect growth when running a business is practically impossible now in the UK? All the while they have the audacity to bash others.
It's because Rachel said that Nigel Farage hasn't got a clue on the economy. Do you think that some of the policies that Reform have put forward are a little bit pie in the sky?
Well, listen, the key thing with Reform is going into the last election, they knew they weren't going to get into government. So the policies they were announcing were, a set of values, a set of ideals. They weren't a serious, concrete policy agenda.
Rachel Reeves is so far out of her depth that she thinks she's right about everything. Is this the height of delusion, or is she simply out of touch with reality? Either way, she called Nigel Farage and Reform UK out and ended up making a fool out of herself. Out of everyone in this country, Rachel is the last person who should be talking about the economy now, since she has proven herself to be utterly incompetent. Every single thing she has done has either increased inflation, saddled us with more taxes, or clobbered businesses. Nana Akua puts Rachel in her place with a harsh reality check.
I think the values that they espouse, which is a smaller state, lower taxes, more fiscal responsibility, are broadly good ones. They need to add a bit of meat onto the bones. But Nigel Farage is a man that has done very well, set up businesses, run businesses, and clearly has a much better understanding of the economy than Rachel Reeves.
I don't think there's anyone on Rachel on the front bench that has actually run a business.
No, they have been involved in charities, though. And, that same charity sector that they've been involved in, they've spent a lot of their career dedicated to, is now being hammered by their own tax rises.
Nigel Farage is more fitted to run this nation's economy than Rachel for obvious reasons. For one, Farage doesn't lie on his CV and pretend to be an economist. Secondly, Farage actually knows how to run a successful business, unlike Starmer and his cronies who live in a fantasy land, receiving freebies from the liberal elites. Labour, especially Rachel, don't understand how growth and business go hand in hand, and it clearly shows. Not a single frontbencher in the Labour Party has any clue on how to run the country, and they're all looking like a bunch of toddlers. Just how tone deaf can Rachel Reeves get? It's not just Nana Akua who's slamming her left and right. Dozens of other people have exposed Rachel to be a fraudster.
You couldn't wish for sort of worse news, if you like, on the economy if you tried. Labour have come up with this response to it. I suppose they're hoping that we're all going to sort of bury this economic bad news in an overdose of turkey, Christmas pudding and festive cheer.
Labour is in crisis mode. They are trying to do everything they can to do damage control and hide Rachel Reeves' absolute disasters. She has single-handedly brought Britain to its knees as the economy is crumbling right now. They're terrified and running around trying to rebrand themselves with Starmer's new milestones, but do they really expect us to trust them now? Starmer and Rachel Reeves have broken every single promise they've made to the public, and nobody trusts them anymore. No amount of deflecting is going to save this sinking ship of a government at this point. point, especially not after Rachel's recent blunders.
Because right now, things are really not looking good for the UK economy and the UK PLC.
Now, let's just have a look at some of those things. So, the state of Britain's stalling economy is disappointing, according to a Labour cabinet minister. Leading business groups said the country's fiscal outlook was headed for the worst of all worlds, and that's from the CBI.
Every single economic expert in this country is alarmed by the absolute mess that Rachel Reeves has created. They're warning us of a potential market crash, and things are getting worse by the day. More and more businesses are leaving this country. As for the small businesses, they've been completely ruined by this disastrous government. Even Labour's own ministers are turning on them, and for good reason. Rachel Reeves isn't fit to even manage her own finances, let alone the finances of this entire country.
Rachel Reeves has said that she was going to grow the economy, and arguably, given the numbers, she's crashed it. Liz Truss was hounded out of office for doing that, and frankly, she didn't do such a bad job in comparison to Rachel, did she?
Well, I think these are very different circumstances and how much you can kind of blame the Chancellor for the decisions they've made. But I will say certainly that they've made a huge amount of their kind of credentialism. They've said that we're going to do things very differently. We're going to have a premium stability premium. And actually, it turns out it doesn't look so much as stability as more like stagnation.
The biggest promise that Labour made to win the election was that they'd fix the economy. Rachel Reeves and Starmer promised that they will help out the working class Brits and encourage businesses. Now, the reality is completely different. The working class is living miserably as the cost of living has gone through the roof and growth is flatlining. Sure, some of the comparisons that are being made might sound unfair, but Rachel Reeves is to blame for the majority of the problems that she has created.
Things aren't turning around in 12 months, that's going to be an issue. Not least, of course, because at that point, I think that it's much harder for Labour ministers to keep saying, oh, we had a terrible inheritance. Well, I think that worked in the early days, but the further we get away from July the 4th, and the more and more which businesses keep saying, no, we're making these investment decisions because of your rhetoric, your policies, your tax changes, then it's going to get much harder for the government, not least, of course, because growth was supposedly the #1 mission of Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer. And if they're not getting that by the end of next year, you wait to think, how is it going to turn around in the medium to long term?
Labour's running out of excuses to hide behind. Remember how Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer whined about the economy being in a terrible state when they got into power? The whole 22 billion black hole and a bunch of other shenanigans. All of that is out the window as we're 6 months into this incompetent government and things are far from different. How much more will the people tolerate before they start demanding her resignation? The backlash has already been furious and people are getting angrier by the day.
How long have Labour got before the restlessness sets in either within their party or indeed the nation? I mean, we've already seen the polls which have seen, 19 points taken off Labour's popularity, putting him now on a par with Jeremy Corbyn at his low point.
Labour is on borrowed time and Rachel Reeves will have to look for a new job at this rate. In fact, things are actively getting worse and people simply have no faith left in Rachel anymore. She has lost all credibility, either due to her idiotic policies or her endless list of lies. The approval ratings are literally in the gutter, and that's exactly where this government might end up soon as well. Things have gotten so out of control that Labour ministers are looking to rebel against Starmer and his cronies, and for good reason.
I mean, if we have 6 further months of bad news, I'm assuming at that point somebody will say, look, this just isn't working.
I mean, I think we've already got some restlessness. Let's not forget that, of course, that it was within 100 days.
There's a huge internal revolt brewing up within the Labour Party itself. The people being outraged is one thing, but it's especially pathetic when their own party is turning on them, not even 6 months in, and we're already seeing people either resigning or being fired from the party. Labour needs to get a grip, or at this rate, they'll never win an election ever again. Rachel Reeves deserves an award for destroying not only the nation's economy, but the Labour Party's credibility as well. They're not just incompetent, they're shameless as well, especially Rachel Reeves.
Yeah, I mean, this just doesn't feel right for me. I don't know about you, Matthew, but Rachel the Grinch from accounts like Reeves, I mean, 45 pence in every pound donated to charity will now effectively go to the government. That just doesn't feel right.
What should they do? Because, and I suppose there's the question of where you draw the line.
Does it not sound incredibly greedy and morally corrupt of Rachel Reeves to take a cut from charity as well? It's as if the countless taxes she burdened us with aren't enough anymore to satisfy her. Just how further will Starmer and Rachel Reeves stop? They started with lying, breaking promises, and now they're robbing charities as well. It's no wonder that people are calling her the Grinch, and it's a rather fitting nickname.
honestly, for me, it doesn't feel right that what this government is doing is taking money from pensioners, taking money from farmers, now taking money from charities. I mean, charities are something where actually, you know, you all go in, you buy an extra mug you don't need for the cupboard and everything like that, and you say, yes, I'll do the gift aid because there's that bit extra money. But if you knew that half of that was going...
Gift aid is a way I'm not saying I'm Mother Teresa, but I've just given a little bit of money to charity for Christmas, and that is, you know...
Let's take a look at everything Rachel Reeves has done as the Chancellor of this country. We started with her deliberately freezing the winter fuel allowance that will leave around 4,000 pensioners freezing to death. Then she went ahead and chucked away billions on idiotic climate policies and pay rises to Labour's union paymasters. The farmers got clobbered as well with that inheritance tax, and now she wants charity money as well. Is there any end to this, or does Rachel Reeves want to rob us dry?
Of course, there are huge pressures on the economy. Rachel Reeves would say that your party, the Conservative Party, actually left them in this situation, and this is what they've had to do.
I'm sure she would, and if she could point to any evidence that there actually was a £22 billion black hole, and if she could point to any evidence that actually giving bumper pay rises to the unions instead of actually fixing the economy, then I'd be happy to have that discussion with her.
It just doesn't add up that Rachel kept complaining about a supposed £22 billion black hole, but then gave insane inflation-busting pay rises to the unions. In fact, the whole excuse has been debunked by the Office of Budget Responsibility, yet she's still lying to us about it. And how long does she intend for us to believe the same sob story? It's been 6 months and we've seen negative progress. Unsurprisingly, we should have seen this coming.
You know, who'd have thought putting up taxes on people employing people is going to be a bad thing? I mean, it was very predictable, wasn't it? Rachel Reeves is way out of her depth, isn't she?
Yeah, well, she is. And the economists have this expression called a doom loop. And basically, I think that's the danger that Britain could fall into this loop now. And what it basically means is that a government puts up taxes because it wants to spend it on public services or reduce the deficit. But those taxes depress growth.
Is anyone really shocked that Rachel Reeves's economic blunders are coming back to haunt us? The raise in national insurance was perhaps the stupidest thing that Rachel Reeves did, and she's not going to get away with it. The consequences of her delusional policy have been a disaster, and our economy is headed towards doom. Businesses just can't afford to employ a lot of people anymore, and thanks to Rachel, unemployment is rising as well.
And what they do, rather than learning the lesson that they've made a mistake, they come back for more taxes. And then the economy softens again. And that is Rachel Reeves' big danger now. She has so burdened and already over, you know, the tax burden was at a highest record level at the end of the Tory years. It wasn't low then. She's added to it now, and I think we're in a very dangerous position.
Rachel Reeves is so tone deaf that she refuses to listen to anyone at all. Just like Starmer and the rest of his cronies, Rachel thinks that she's right and everyone who disagrees with her is wrong. The smart thing to do would have been to reverse at least a dozen of her nonsensical policies, but instead she just doubled down on it. The tax burdens that we're facing now are insane, and it's only going to get worse.
And Sir Keir Starmer himself was asked, does this mean you're not going to put up taxes again? He said, well, you know, I can't rule it out, which pretty much means, yes, we intend to, which is frankly a disaster. The economy is on red alert. It's killing growth, according to the Bank of England. And yet, I remember in the run-up to the snap election, it was a big fight over, no, we're for growth, no, we're for growth, we're going to be all about growth. The last thing you need to do for growth is put up taxes on people who actually do the employing, the private sector.
Starmer and Rachel Reeves try to weasel their way out of giving any real answers to the public. That's because they know for a fact that if they were honest, the public would revolt. Make no mistake, Robert Reeves is coming back for more tax raids, and living in Britain is just going to keep getting more and more difficult by the day.
And then the other thing, of course, that Sir Keir Starmer's doing is sniffing around Europe again, wanting a better deal, and information's already leaked out from the EU side that they're going, right, okay, you better rejoin the single market, you better rejoin the customs union. Do you think that's part of the reason why they've picked Mandelson, because he actually knows his way around?
As if Rachel Reeves's actions weren't enough to be an absolute nightmare for the British public, Starmer's pushing his own socialist agenda. He's flying around Europe trying to chain us back to the European Union again. Remember that Brexit referendum that the people agreed on? Yeah, Starmer doesn't care as long as his sinister plans succeed. He's trying to fiddle the rules, and it's not going to work.
And the public, are wise enough to see when someone like Starmer is trying to change the game for his advantage. And I think Labour got a big donation from a foreign-based environmental campaigner at the last election. They didn't seem very worried when that was happening. It's only when Reform or someone else is getting an advantage that they seem to want to change the law.
Sir Keir and Rachel Reeves made the perfect duo of doom for this country. Now that they've lost all support, Starmer is trying all he can to desperately hold onto power. They're so insecure that they're trying everything they can to sabotage Reform UK. Nigel Farage is crushing Labour, so naturally Starmer and Rachel Reeves are terrified.
Shocking. I mean, I actually find those two stories combined quite alarming. It's the sort of activity you see by an African dictator who wants to cling on to power. Oh, we're going to mess about and cancel these elections. Oh, we're going to prevent other parties having any sort of funding. I mean, I actually think it's quite alarming.
Well, postponing or cancelling elections is it really is a sign of dictatorship.
There's no going back from this for Starmer and Rachel Reeves. Labour is screwed and they're only making things worse for themselves. The people are fed up with Rachel Reeves and she's losing control at a rapid pace. On the other hand, Nigel Farage is gaining support and the duo of doom, Starmer and Rachel Reeves, are behaving like third world dictators. Do they really think that they can get away with all of this and that the British public will forget? Rachel Reeves needs to be held accountable, and that's something you can help out with by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.